I think living a life of an artist is the best life you could ever aspire to live. I was 19 going on 20, and I happened to be with my group in Florence, Italy, and I decided I was going to miss my curfew and stay out all night. The girls on our trip were like hooking up with these really hot Italians, and I was like, you know what? I gotta find me a club or a gay bar or something. So I didn't tell anybody, and I figured it out, and I found this bar, and I went there, and I ended up meeting a guy who was older who was French. I had this moment, which was when I saw Call Me By Your Name, I was like, wow, I kind of had this kind of moment in my life. Like that film really, I was like, wow. I was that age with an older man in his 30s, in Italy. And it was a very romantic love affair. In some ways, Philippe was his name, became more of a mentor to me, and he actually offered to take me to Paris for a week. So it turned out that Philippe was actually a designer for Mérité and François Gerbeau, a fashion designer. He was like their Hedi Slimane. And when I met him, I was actually wearing Gerbeau jeans. And I could not believe I was meeting the designer for Gerbeau. Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Missouri called California, which is kind of an oxymoron, like in a way. Like by the time I was old enough to realize there was like this other place called California that was way more like radder than where I was. Yeah, I was like, yeah, where am I? What am I doing? But it was a small town, near the capital of Missouri, and very right-wing Christian, like conservative. Um, I never really felt like I fit in, um, from the beginning. So I
Did
couldn't
you
wait to get
have you
out.
ever seen Ozark? Was that in Missouri?
Yes, that is not very far at all from where I live. In fact, my sister lives there, and I was just down there this summer. I've watched a couple episodes, and I'd like to finish that um series. It
I think
looks,
it's pretty well written. I didn't mean to distract with
yeah,
that, but
no,
like
no,
that's
I
just what
mean,
I thought of when you were like Missouri. I'm like, oh, Ozark.
yeah,
Um,
totally. It's so bizarre and so weird. Like, yeah, I always feel like an outsider every time I go back,
um,
for sure.
and so when did you just left as soon as you could? Did you leave for college?
Well, I got really lucky. In high school, from an early age, I was always into art, but I mean, it wasn't where I'm from. We didn't have an art museum. My father, when I was 11 years old, got me an art teacher who was very much like a Bob Ross teacher. He even looked like Bob Ross. And so I started these like painting in his studio with other like farm wives, housewives, painting like barns and like landscapes. And uh, so I learned kind of like an oil painting technique. I was copying his paintings that were copies from a young age. Like, I won some little like write-ups in the local paper, like I won something like best drawing or something like silly like that. But anyways, in high school, my my art teacher was like, "Well, what are you going to do when you graduate from high school?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." And she's like, "Why don't you be a graphic designer?" I'm like, "What's that?" So she explained to me, like she picked up something that was packaged and like, this is design. And I was like, "Oh, cool. I want to do that." And so she helped me build a portfolio to apply to a university for a scholarship. And I actually won the scholarship. It was a full ride. It was really wild. I mean, like, they invited me down and there were three of us. And it was their like senior thesis exhibit, and they were going to announce the winner. And yeah, I couldn't believe it. I got a full ride as a art and design scholarship. So that was my ticket out of California, Missouri.
And
And
what was the school?
it was a state university. It was called Southwest Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri, and I only spent a year there. I ended up, like, transferring to, um, the Art Institute of Chicago. I had a really good friend in Springfield who was an artist, and they put me into a program called image production design, which is another word for, like, illustration or and so I was taking a lot of, like, art courses as well as design courses, and, so I had all these, like, art friends in the art department, and they're like, "Don't sell out, be an artist." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right." And, this was, like, the late '80s, and my friend introduced me to the work of David Wojnarowicz, and a lot of the artists and things that were happening in New York City at the time in the '80s, so everything was political, and it really got me very excited,
There was
and
a lot of very graphical stuff happening in the '80s too. Um,
I think that's also kind of, like, what
w
spoke to me.
words in and, like, I'm completely blanking on names.
Like Barbara Kruger,
Sure.
Jenny Holzer, like, I couldn't
Christopher
believe it.
Wool is
Yes,
one that I
Christopher
think of too.
Waltz, I feel like he was more, like, '90s,
That's true, yeah.
but it was really, like, people like, Sue Coe, is it Sue Coe? She was a British artist who did really incredible, like, kind of German expressionist kind of, artwork that was very political of, like, what was going on at the time in the '80s, and all of that really spoke to me, and because I was, as a young kid, always concerned about the environment, like, just everything, like, you know, nuclear war, like, it was, I saw that the day after, remember that?
I remember that, yeah.
So, it, like, kind of put an impression in my mind.
Terrified everyone for about 6 months or so.
Yeah, so, um, my friend was he's an amazing artist too. He lives in New York still, Robert Boyd, um, and he was just really instrumental in, like, getting me to make the move to get out of design and be an artist, and I remember telling my father, I'm like, "Dad, I think I wanna, like, switch schools and go to this school in Chicago because I don't think I wanna sell out, I wanna be an artist." I actually said that, and my dad was like, "Okay." But then later on, he regretted, I think, um, only
Did your
because
did that mean that your parents were, because you were on a free ride, you were on a full
yeah, I was
ride.
on a free ride, and then I got accepted to the Art Institute of Chicago, but I obviously needed help there. And, so, it was a big change for me, and I'm glad I did it. It
But in
was
the end, your parents were supportive.
They were always very supportive from a
Okay.
very, very early age. They're like, "You're gonna be an artist."
I kinda wanted to rewind a little bit because you
Uh,
started this with your dad got you a painting teacher,
yes.
and I'm like, that didn't just happen out of the blue,
No,
right?
no, no. I mean, my dad told me this story when I was really young. He walked into my room, I was a baby, and I was literally painting on the wall with my poop. Like, I was standing up in my crib, I had pooped my pants, and I'm literally smearing it all he's like, "That was your first painting." And then when I was a little bit older, my mom would be like, "Go draw on the table." So I would draw all over the table, and she would come back and be like, "Oh my god." But I did that at my grandmother's house because she had a certain kind of table where you could draw on it and, like, wipe it off. But my mom's table, you couldn't wipe it off.
You ruined the
Um,
table.
s
So they saw this and you knew this from a very young age. It wasn't like, yeah, okay.
I
And so when you were like, "I wanna go to the Art Institute of Chicago," your parents were like, "Yeah, okay," or maybe even like, "I wish you would stay at the free place, but that's okay."
they didn't really question it too much. Yeah, I know, it seems really weird because looking back on it now. But um, yeah, ended up going to Chicago. No, later on, I ended up getting a master's, and I had to pay for that myself. I'm still paying for it, And I mean, I'm almost done with it, but then I was in the program, um, the forgiveness program, which was like stalled. And now I think I have to pay the remaining, but I actually defaulted in 2005, which cost me $11,000. And that's when my dad called me because he was a co-signer and he said, I'm not paying for this. And I'm like, don't worry, I got this. And then not knowing what default meant, and then I sold a bunch of art that year, which I finally got paid for, and the money had to go. Basically, it was like throwing the money away. It was awful. Yeah,
The debt hole.
it was absolutely terrible. It didn't go to my principal
And
2 years ago.
did you stay at the art institute for that, or you went somewhere
No,
else?
no, I went I was in New York at that time and I decided to stay in New York City, and the only graduate program in graphic design at the time was Pratt Institute. I think that has since changed. And the reason why I went back to school for design is because I was a cater waiter for a long time in New York City. And after about doing 10 years of that, or no, not even like 5 years of it, um, I knew I knew the computer was going to change everything. And this was like 1998. And I knew it would become like an important player in all kinds of places, like even art. So I'm like, I better get a computer and like I can get a skill set and like make more money. And so my thesis project was K48, which was my little art magazine. And with that, I wanted to kind of merge all of my interest from design, music, countercultural fanzines, and art. So it was kind of like a this convergence of me being in all these different scenes in New York City and trying to pull them all together into this one form. Um, and yeah, that was kind of how K48 started was my thesis.
Yeah, but that was a big question. I have a few questions, and I'm like, make sure to ask these. Because I was aware of K48 when I knew you, and we talked yesterday, and I was saying like, I met you at a time when I was meeting a lot of new people and interacting and involving you all in projects that I was doing and such. And so I kind of skimmed over a lot of like what is it that you do and things, but K48 was something about you that sort of couldn't be ignored. You had the parties, you had launches, you did right, you did multiple iterations of this.
Yes,
This was an
we
ongoing thing.
we did installations, and yeah, I really, I was into, I think, like relational aesthetics, and I thought that the artist could offer something more than just like, you know, an object to sell in a gallery. I kind of really wanted to create something that was more of a social interaction and build community, and I really that's how I saw myself as an artist. A lot of people, I think, were confused that because I switched gears, I was in the 90s, I was making these kind of like techno electronic drawings that were inspired by the new technology, and they were very abstract and kind of very formal. Um, I first showed them at Feature in New York and then Green Neftali. Um, and I was about to do a solo show actually at Green Neftali. I was working for Carol, and I was in school and I had no money and I had no studio, and I was making these small drawings the size of my laptop screen, and they were that size for a reason. And she had this big space, and I was like, Carol, I'm kind of nervous to do this. I'm not sure what to do. I don't have any supply money to make something big for your space. And she actually was mad at me and was like, you shouldn't be in school. And so we canceled the show and I started K48. And I think making that kind of abrupt switch um, was the first time perhaps people saw me as um, difficult or um, not consistent enough for them.
I feel you so hard in that regard. You might not even really know, but, like, yeah, but about you, I wanna rewind a little bit because I feel like we got ahead of ourselves. I had no idea that you did a show at Feature and Green Naftali in the '90s. So let's build our way from our institute of Chicago to there. So you go from Chicago to New York. Why?
Actually, I went from Chicago to Paris.
All right.
So, yeah, I ended up doing a semester in Italy in the summer of 1990. You know, I was 19 going on 20, and I happened to be with my group in Florence, Italy, and I decided I was going to miss my curfew and stay out all night. You know, the girls on our trip were like hooking up with these really hot Italians, and I was like, you know what? I gotta find me a club or a gay bar or something because I had a fake ID in Chicago and I was going out to all the clubs. So I didn't
And you
tell
don't need that
anybody.
in Italy, right?
Yeah, and so I didn't tell anybody, and I figured it out, and I found this bar, and I went there, and I ended up meeting a guy who was older who was French. And you know, I had this moment, which was when I saw Call Me by Your Name, I was like, wow, I kind of had this kind of moment in my life. Like that film really, I was like, wow. You know, I mean, it was different story, but I was that age with an older man in his 30s, you know, in Italy. And it was a very romantic love affair. In some ways, Philippe was his name, became more of a mentor to me. And he actually offered to take me to Paris for a week. And I was like, I asked my teachers and I said, can I go to Paris for a week? And they're like, sure, just get your assignments done. And I was like, okay. So it turned out that Philippe was actually a designer for Mérité and Francois Gerbeau, a fashion designer. He was like their Hedi Slimane. And when I met him, I was actually wearing Gerbeau jeans. And, you know, in Chicago in the early in 1990, we had a Gerbeau store. It was like a very fashionable thing. And I could not believe I was meeting the designer for Gerbeau. In fact, we left the bar on his moped at like 2 a.m. and we're leaving Florence. And we were literally on this road passing fields of sunflowers. And all of a sudden, the chain on his moped just like breaks. And and so he throws the bike in the ditch and he's like, I'm like, what do we do? We're both drunk and where's your house? We're in the middle of nowhere. And he points to the moon and he says, you see the moon? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you see the light in the trees on the mountain? And I was like, yes. And he's like, that's my house. And it was literally a couple miles away. And so we start walking and we're, you know, it's in Tuscany. So they have these like little mountains, little hills, you know, kind of like the Catskills sort of. And so we're going up this mountain and he puts his hand in a bush and these gates open and it's like a 17th century chateau, like a small like, mansion, like a big. I was just like, what? Where are we? It was magical. And you could see all the lights of Florence below because we're up really high at that point. And the first thing he wants to do, this is 1990, he wants to show me his organic garden. And it was the first time I ever heard the word organic. And I was like, wow, sure. Like, what do you mean? And so we go in the moonlight and he's showing me, you know, his garden. And then we go inside and I'm just like, where are we? And he's showing me all these drawings and sketches and fabrics. And that's when he tells me that he's a designer for Gerbeau. And I was like, wow. So he's in Italy making a collection, doing research, etc. And they've rented this place for him where he's working. And so we stay up all night and it's kinda comical because in the morning, the sun's coming up, we didn't sleep. Sun's coming up, and he calls me a car service, and it's literally like a black Mercedes with tinted windows, and I go back to my group in Florence, and they're literally frantically looking for me. They've packed my belongings. They're then we're going to Venice that morning, and, they're about to call the police, and, I get out of this car, and they're like, "Where have you been?" You know, and I was like, "Oh, I just went for a coffee, an espresso." And, so I ended up telling the girls, on the trip that I was close to, and one of my teachers overheard, and she said, "Just bring me back something from Chabot and you'll pass." And, so I go to Venice, and this is all pre-cell phone, and Philippe is like, "Meet me here at Piazza della San Marco." I forget the name of the place, but it's a very famous, it's still there, like, restaurant, coffee shop, place, cafe, and, it was like that. We just, like, met up everywhere I went with my group, Verona, Venice, Philippe would show up, and he would spend time with me, and we would go look at all the art that I was supposed to go see, and he had already maybe seen the exhibit and knew a lot about it and would kinda teach me. And that's when he was like, "Do you wanna go to Paris for a week?" So, I guess on Gerbaud's dime, he flew me to Paris, and I met him there, and we had this amazing week, and one of his friends at one big dinner party one night was like, "Why don't you move to Paris? We'll get you a job." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm coming to Paris, definitely. I'll be
And
back."
so and did you? And that was what, your first job?
Yeah, so I saved up my money in Chicago. I told my family after I graduated that I was moving to Paris, and I worked at this big fancy restaurant in Chicago called the Waterfront, and I just saved my money and I bought a ticket and I went to Paris. It was September 3rd,
Did your
1991.
family know that you liked men?
At that point, I was not out yet, but my
Okay.
parents, they totally knew.
Okay.
Yeah, so but we didn't talk about it yet. I wasn't really, um, out. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Just curious, because like, it might be fun to be able to tell them a whole story, but
oh, I know. I think I told my mom later on, but, my father just didn't really wanna talk about it. I mean, he met my first boyfriend, and he knew that we were boyfriends, and we met in undergrad in Springfield. Um, but that's a whole 'nother story. But, yeah, like,
and so how long did you spend in Paris?
I spent 3 years there.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And you
Uh,
were working for, you were working in fashion? Or you,
no,
like, just had
so
some other random job?
yeah, so I studied, like, in Chicago, I did, a lot photography and printmaking and artist books, were kind of like my 3 main focuses, and, I did a lot of printmaking, so the the job I was supposed to get in Paris was at, um, a big printing house, and it was actually ran by an American woman named Erica Greenberg, and she was the head of a big, um it was called Gallery Mag, I think, Maeght or something like this, and, they made big editions with artists, like silkscreen etchings, like, and it was the early '90s recession, it was 1991 at that point, and, she had just laid off almost all of her staff. She laid off 30 people, and I showed up with my portfolio, and she's like, "I'm so sorry, but I can't hire you," and I was like, "What?" I need a job. And so, she looked at my portfolio, and she was impressed, and she got on the phone, and she called another American, Michael Woolworth. Michael Woolworth, his grandfather built Woolworth Tower, the first skyscraper in New York City, and he had a print shop on Ile Saint Louis. And, Michael hired me kind of as a glorified intern. I was paid a little bit, but not much. And oh gosh, a lot happened very kind of quickly. I mean, after I moved there, Philippe had contracted HIV and his previous lover was dying of AIDS. And back then it was like everybody was dying. Like
And that had to be terrifying for you.
it was very terrifying. So Philippe's life kind of turned upside down.
Uh-huh.
And he was basically like, I can't teach you, I can't, because he sort of saw himself too as like a mentor to me. And he was kind of taking me on as a project, I think, in some ways. And he all of a sudden didn't have time. So um he put me up with his best friend who happened to be a famous singer in the 60s that I'd never heard of before. Her name was Claudine. And she had a really big Hotel Particulier in the 17th, I believe it was, and I became her houseboy. And it was like 4 floors. She was never there, but
What does it mean to be her houseboy? Like I think of that as sort of like a kinky sexual
no,
situation.
no.
That's not what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she was intense. She was always in black, always black shades. I had to go out and buy her Johnny Walker Red, and
You're like a personal
and
assistant.
yes.
Okay.
Well, Philippe would just be like, okay, um, go buy a bunch of flowers and put them all over, and like, I just basically they needed someone to live in this big place and kind of keep it up and pay the rent. And then when she showed up, I had to like make sure everything was turned on and like uh
Fridge
so
stocked or whatever.
yeah.
Lots of liquor or whatever they need.
Yes. Well, when she would come back, Philippe would come over and they would have all night cocaine parties, like on the third floor, which was her recording studio. And I was, of course, never allowed to partake. And I was like, yeah. So and at that point I was working for Michael Woolworth, and then after that I ended up quitting. I mean, I did an artist book, lithography, and Michael Woolworth's litho press was one of the very first litho press. It was
This
from
a is this a turning litho or a stone litho?
stone litho, and the press itself was like ancient. It was
Yeah.
like, when was the advent of lithography, stone lithography? Like the 1700s or 1800s?
No idea, honestly. I did a lot of it in college, but I can't remember
But
that.
this press was very old, and so we were doing an artist book with Roberto Matta, actually. And I could kick myself in the butt for not taking one of those or getting one of those, because Michael couldn't pay me, and that's why I quit at the end. And I had a chambre de bonne at that point because I had gotten kicked out of Claudine's place, and I couldn't afford my rent. So I ended up quitting working for him. But if I had one of those little books by Roberto Matta, I could pay off my mortgage probably. But anyways, next
And
I
so did you wind up going back to New York essentially because everything fell apart and you went broke? Or not went
well,
broke, but like you just couldn't afford it?
that was just my first year in Paris. So I have 2 more years left. And I ended up meeting somebody again older than me. He was 36 and I was then 22, I think now. And he was amazing. He was not at all like Philippe. In fact, Philippe didn't like him because he was too provincial, I think. Philippe was more like in fashion, and before Gerbeau, Philippe worked for Gautier, and Gautier found him on the street. He was a heroin addict. And Philippe's story was incredible. Um, And so anyways, Philippe didn't approve of Franck because he was he was from the country, and I guess he wasn't really as fashionable as somebody like Philippe was. And that was okay with me because Franck was funny and sexy and so I moved in with Franck for a while, and then I had this best friend in Paris who was Australian, and he was moving back to Australia, and he had two jobs that he was giving up, and I was the perfect fit for both of them. One of them was an au pair job where they wanted another guy who spoke both French and English. And since the little boy Sam knew me and like really liked me, it was a no-brainer. They hired me right away um to be his babysitter. So I got a free chambre de bonne at that point in the 18th. That was really nice, with like a balcony overlooking all of Paris.
Can you explain what that is? I'm not even sure how does chambre de bon.
Oh, so a chambre de bonne is like in the apartment buildings in Paris, always the top floor are these like really small apartments that usually were occupied by maids that were probably the maids for
Chambre, like room, de
yes.
bon, like a good room or a happy
Yes, but
room or
the
something like
bonne
that.
is the like the housekeeper. I think chambre de bonne. Like the bonne would be your nanny or your housekeeper or like somebody who was helping your family
Okay.
with the kids, or I think that's what it is.
Okay, continue. Now that I've clarified what that
So
is.
yeah, they're all over Paris. They're tiny. Sometimes they're just one single room. And
They're like New York apartments.
well, they're actually smaller. They're really tiny. The one that I had, the first one I had was literally, I had a tiny little window, and there was down the hall was a common bathroom, but it was literally just a hole in the floor that you pooped in.
It
So,
happens.
um, but the one that I got for babysitting Sam was like amazing. It had two rooms and then had a separate little mini kitchen that turned into a shower. And it had a real toilet with a bidet in the escalier. The escalier is like the stairwell. And so that was amazing because I had a job where I didn't have to come up with rent money. My rent was already paid for. I mean, it was already it was already gratuitous. So the other job that Robert had that he was giving up was working for this Australian transgender person named Jacqueline Hyde. Jacqueline and her rough trade boyfriend had kind of a fake antique business where they would create faux antique furniture in the style of like Louis XVI or Napoleon Empire. And so Jackie loved me because I went to art school, and she taught me how to do all these techniques to paint and gild and restore. Some things were actual antiques that we restored, but mostly we would even find things in the street, like pieces like furniture, side tables, and we would turn them into chinoiserie. Chinoiserie was a style of, I think the Brits did it like in the turn of the century, where, or maybe it was older than that, but they kind of made a fake Chinese looking scenes that were,
Yeah, I was gonna say I think from my rudimentary French chinoiserie would actually just mean Chinese, right?
yes. So we would make those. She taught me how to do it. And because I have a lot of experience with toll painting, I didn't tell you that, but when I was a kid, I was also doing toll painting, which is another kind of like craft. Um,
Which is what? Explain it to me. Do you mean like toile, like on fabric?
no, it could be on anything. Like we painted on like it's very crafty. Like it could be on like I did a hope chest once that I brought back after my mom passed this spring. Anyways, it was hard to get rid of it because I painted this when I was a teenager.
Uh-huh.
But there's panels on it of the Four Seasons, and there's like this landscape with a house and a barn. It's very crafty looking. It's very
But what is it about it that is specific? Like it's a specific technique because you understand how to do something permanently on like laminated wood, or not laminated, but
well, just having skill, like doing crafts, and like chinoiserie was kind of a craft in a way. So, just having those kind of like crafty artistic skills. So we would, and they lived in the 19th in these bombed out atelier. And the cool thing was there was a courtyard, and in this courtyard was um a theater group. And Juliette Binoche, I think she was in that series Red, White, and Blue, I think, or she was there. I would see her all the time because she was in this, like, it was before she got really famous. So at the end of the courtyard was this little house that Jackie and Terry lived in, and they were totally squatting. It was like a squat. And after I left Paris, the city of Paris bought them out for like 1 million francs. Um, so anyways, we did all the work, and the back part of it were these, like, literally they were bombed during, World War II. And so part of them were unusable, and down below we had like a cast iron like potbelly stove that we would light in the winter to keep warm, and we would just like speedball. Like, she taught me like how to speedball, and I was like, never really made sense to me, but that's like coke and heroin together.
thought that
And
was what Jen was like. Let me let him tell me what that is.
yeah, and we would just like do these things, and they would end up selling them to some of the biggest antique dealers in Paris. Um,
Were they selling them like
as
they were
real,
selling them? So these are like
yes,
counterfeits.
yes.
Oh, that's
The other
tricky.
the other interesting thing was Terry had this other operation going in Kiev, in the early 90s, where he would go to Kiev, and they had these like Russian, Soviet realist painters that were making fake, you know, uh, paintings. And
Paintings, yeah. There's like a whole thing. There was actually a time when I thought it would be great to have like an old master painting, and I researched, and you can buy them because Um, I also researched laws. I can't remember why. I don't think I've ever wanted to like fake an old painting, but if you change the dimensions, I mean, art students do this. You can go and copy an old master painting, and as long as you change the dimensions by X and Y, and of course you don't try to say that it's perfectly legal. So you can buy copies of old master paintings, and a lot of them come from Russia, and they're just like slightly different dimensions.
yeah. So his boss they ended up getting caught because they would bring them back, and there's like a Christie's in Paris called Hotel Drouot, and that's where they would sell them, like in an auction. Anyways, it was like,
So
so
you
I was making cash
So
every
they
Friday.
got caught, but you didn't get implicated?
Well, no, not at, I wasn't part of that. I wasn't part of that. I was just saying that Jackie's
Okay.
boyfriend was was involved in that. He didn't have to go to prison, but I think his boss did. But it was just a funny time, and like uh that was separate and apart from the antique thing. But I just remember Terry coming back from Kiev with like a communist Mickey Mouse for me, and like these little toys that he would pick up.
Uh-huh.
And um
So what ultimately ended Paris for you?
um well, I went back once in my 3 years in Paris. I went to New York to visit. Um and that was my second time to New York. My first time was in 1989, and I was in love with New York then. And then I came back in 93, the year before I moved there. And let's see, I saw the Whitney Biannual that year, and it was a really, really good one, you know. And my I saw my friend Robert, and you know, again, like all the art that was inspiring me was either coming out of New York or LA. And I I think I felt too dislocated in Paris. I felt too dislocated from their history. And even though I was very active in going to all the galleries in Paris, all the fashionable galleries, I went all the time to the openings. And but almost everything I was seeing was like Nan Golden, oh no, not Peter Hujar yet. What else? Mike Kelly was showing,
So they
Sean
were all New York and LA
Landers.
artists.
Yeah, Sean Landers, I remember very well. Jennifer Flay Gallery was really cool in Paris in the early 90s. Um,
Did you meet people there that ever wound up like resonating with you when you moved back, or does that wind up being like, does your Paris experience kind of like isolated
uh,
socially?
sorry. Um, do you mean did like
Well,
my
like you saw Sean Landers opening.
yes.
If you'd met Sean Landers, you might have been able to say hi when you came back or something. Did you meet anyone in Paris who wound up
No.
like resonating with you, or being a helpful connection or something?
You know, I think I was really young. I was in my early 20s, and you know, I was very keen on the artists of the time, and very, you know, I'd go to the Pompidou and I would spend hours in the bookshop. And I actually bought all of these amazing books that were kept in a box in my ex-boyfriend's basement, which he ended up throwing away. One of them was the show Helter Skelter that took place in LA, you know, with Mike Kelly was in it, like Chris Burden. Anyways, I would do anything to have that book today. I think it's worth a lot of money. But anyways, I didn't meet any of those artists personally in person. I think I was too shy and too young, and they were older. So when I got to New York, my only friend was Robert. And we actually had a
And
fall.
was that the reason that so you decided to move back because you were like, you had, if I can put words in your mouth, you had some sort of internal craving to
Come
immerse
to New
yourself, to
York.
find your voice,
Mm.
and you had a friend, and was your friend saying, "Hey, you got to come, you got to come, you got to come"?
No, he never pressured me to come to New York. It was totally a decision I made on my own. In fact, my friends in Paris did not want me to leave. They were
Of
like, "We
course
will
not.
get you married. We will get your papers." I was there with no visa,
Yeah,
nothing. Everything was under the table. And I think you could get away with it then, but now you probably cannot.
yeah.
I even had a my own France Telecom like phone bill, like a I had my own. Back then, they gave you this little thing called Minitel, which was a little tiny computer. It was like a screen with a keyboard, very tiny. And they had this thing that was like the internet before the internet, where you could like hook up with people online, but you couldn't see them. You were just texting with them. And I don't think the US had that at all. This was in the early 90s. And I actually had a Minitel. I left France in 1994 owing France Telecom like $100. I never paid it.
Well, and in 1994, for context, that's especially for young persons, that's a significant sum.
Yeah, that was like 30 years ago. So, um, I left on my own. My friends wanted me to stay, and I still love Paris very much. I went back for the first time in 20 years a year ago, last September, and I saw Jackie, and we had an amazing time. I saw Franck, my ex-boyfriend, Philippe. I'm not sure what happened to him. He didn't stay in contact with me, and I can't find him. I've looked everywhere for him. So I don't know if he died or so um but yeah,
Maybe he'll see this when we put it out.
yes.
Um, so did you, when you came to New York, did you have a plan? Did you have money? Did you have a job?
I had $200 in my pocket. I had no job. I had a backpack from Paris, and I was really hungover. We had a big going away party. I didn't sleep. I almost missed the flight. So I show up in New York and I'm living in Greenpoint. I got a
What
room
year was this? 94?
September of 1994.
I might have been. I was on Metropolitan Avenue up near Greenpoint Avenue at that time.
I was 99 Commercial Street. Um,
I don't know the area well enough to
you
say,
know
but
where
like,
it's one of the most polluted parts of the city because like there was an oil spill there at one point. But now it's all skyscrapers. It's really wild. I was literally a
yeah.
couple doors down from it was Stephen Perino had a studio. Um,
I mean,
yeah,
I knew Steven years later, but never went to his studio.
yeah. I was also an assistant to Marsha Pels, who still lives in that building. Um, and so Robert had a roommate, and then, oh my God, the loft was ginormous. I had two rooms. One I used as a studio, and the other one was still big enough. It was like a small apartment. And it was like $400.
Yeah.
And
That was why I wound up there because like the only train was the G train, so nobody wanted to be there. Sometimes you had to walk through sketchy areas just to get to the L, which was like a second class train at the time.
I would
Also,
walk over the Polanski Bridge to the 7 train to get into like upper Manhattan. Um, but so yeah, Robert had a really cool job, and that was being a cater waiter. And he got me hooked up with the best caterers in New York City. And I was young and kind of cute back then. Like, uh,
you're still pretty cute.
oh no. Uh, I I immediately got on the A list of all these big catering companies because they wanted young people. And I was waiting on the upper society of New York. I went to all the main high society social parties. Um, at the Met. I worked in apartments in the Sherry Netherland. I've been in parties that were for Hillary Clinton in the 90s before she was running for president. I've waited on Lauren Bacall. I actually spilled ice cream in her hair when I was serving
I'm going to
dessert.
use that in your introduction. Once spilled ice cream on Lauren Bacall's hair.
Oh my God, I love her. We were actually speaking French together because I was freshly back from France and she was speaking to somebody, I think, in French, and so I started speaking to her. And she's always been one of my most favorite Hollywood stars. So, yeah, so Robert got me this job and it just was amazing. I loved it. I could stay out all night and go to the bars and the clubs and then go to work at 3. And then I was at another party, but I was working it. And then we were drinking at the job. And then we would go out drinking after the job. And, it was just like an amazing, um,
So, but did you, I mean, at some point you were able to be making your own work. Like, how does that evolve out of this? Because it sounds like you got yourself in a great situation where you're starstruck, and I know how New York City can do that, and partying.
yeah, so I started making these drawings that reference this new digital era that was starting to come about. And these started around 1995, 96. And
So
I
this
was
is about a year after you get there, or what?
maybe 2 years. I was already from like 1990 really into, the orb and remember Little Fluffy Clouds and
Yeah.
then Orbital and
I
then
I
Aphex
used to
Twin.
work at PIP Printing, which was about 4 doors north of Liquid Sky
Oh my
Design.
God, yeah, Liquid Sky. Yes. I was going to all the record stores. I was I had friends who were DJs who would have pop-up parties and big bubbles like in Brooklyn and Williamsburg when it was like nothing. Um, I was very much into the underground, like uh ambient techno electronica scene.
Mhm.
And I was doing that actually in Paris too. I spent all of my money because I had no rent to pay on books and records. And so I started making work that reference not only the music, but this kind of like loose digital architecture of the internet that was kind of invisible, but I kind of felt it through the music. So the drawings kind of feel like digital electronic glitches and
And
um
how did you wind up on Hudson's radar?
so I was supposed to have a studio visit with another gallery and
And
she was
how did you get that? Like I'm trying to go back to the source. Like I know I walked around, I think I told you this yesterday, with a briefcase full of slides and like slapped them down on everybody's desk. What was your path to getting that first studio visit?
so Feature was my favorite gallery. I became a fixture at every opening to the point where Hudson was calling me Hugs. He nicknamed me Hugs. And that was so like in Paris, I was going to all these galleries, but I never really got close to Jennifer Flay or any of the really cool gallerists. But with Hudson, he was approachable and we just hit it off. And, I just absolutely loved his gallery. I mean, it was my favorite. And so I'm trying to remember the name of this. She's kind of famous, but she was notorious for standing people up for studio visits. So I was supposed to have a studio visit with her. She was interested in coming to my studio. And at the time, I had moved from Greenpoint to like South Williamsburg. I was right underneath the Williamsburg Bridge, and they were literally dismantling it and taking it apart. Not the whole bridge, but they were renovating it. Um, and I was living right below this like crazy crackhead. And so she stood me up, and my friend said, "Why don't you have Hudson over? Since you have everything up on your walls and you're ready." And I was like, okay. So I called Hudson. I'm like, Hudson, will you come to my studio? And he came over and he's like, well, why don't you live here? And I'm like, I do. But I had, rats on in the walls. It was like it was really a sketchy place back then. It was South Sixth between Barry and Wyeth. And so
You probably couldn't even afford to walk down the street there now.
oh my God, I was there recently
The
and I
yeah,
can't.
that place has gotten so, but whatever, whatever.
So
I had to
Hudson,
walk uphill both ways to school and all that kind of stuff.
yes. So Hudson was really into the work and he put me into a group show right away. He's like, I'm doing this group show. Do you want to be in it? And I was like, yes. And that was like so cool. I think I'm still in love with this artist, but I was in a group show with Richard Hawkins.
Don't know.
He shows with Green Neptali. Um, and it was such a cool show. I think there were four people on the show. I'm trying to remember the other two artists, but they were Richard Hawkins' decapitated cute boy heads and my electronic techno drawings. And it was very Dennis Cooper in a way, which I was really into. And so at the time, and and then he put me in a few other shows, and I think that's when Carol Green Neptali noticed and put me in some shows that she was doing, some group
So
shows.
you did multiple group shows at Feature, and
Yes.
then and Carol Green stops by and starts a dialogue with you and
Mhm.
puts you in a few there. Did you do? I know you said that she was going to have a solo with you, and you kind of had to back out because you couldn't scale.
Yes,
Did you do a solo with Feature?
I didn't. I hadn't had a solo show yet. My work was small scale, and I didn't know how to translate it yet to go big because again,
Yeah, I think there's something there with like understanding when you're ready for that, because everybody wants it. Like, if I had shown up at like 22 years old and somebody had said, let's give you a solo show, I would have said yeah. but that might not have been the best idea because you kind of want to know exactly how you want that work shown, you know?
Mhm.
And like you said it before, like having a voice, you
Mhm.
know? And so you want to sort of like know that you are at least starting to really embody your voice before you say, here I am, this is me.
Yeah, I was definitely finding a voice at that time, and yeah, I think I got a little nervous, at the prospect of working with such a big gallery, and also I was in school, and at that point, I had moved from South Williamsburg and was renting a tiny room in a squat in Park Slope.
Did you choose to go to school because you wanted to sort of like build a portfolio to get a job? Was that the motivation? Because you went for graphic design,
Yeah, so, I think it was twofold. I thought it would be too much of a luxury to go for fine art because I wasn't guaranteed any kind of a job when I got out.
but you were doing great. I mean, like
And
just being able to get in a group show in New York City.
I know, I don't know, but I mean, I don't have any regrets. I I think I did what I intuitively felt I needed to do, and I I um and I had this skill set that I was developing early on in undergrad as a designer. You know, it was all pre-computer. Everything was like paste up mechanicals and
Uh-huh.
Rubylith, and I have all of that stuff, most of it. Some of it has gotten mildew, but I was going through some of my old stuff, and my mom passed recently and she saved it for me, but um it's kind of cool to see because it even feels like those early techno drawings. You can see my work, it has a very graphic sensibility to it all
Uh-huh.
throughout all of my different styles and series and mediums that I've chosen. Um you know, a good friend of mine, Billy Miller, always said, "Don't worry about it, Scott. Like, whatever you do is going to have your thumbprint on it no matter what. You can't help that. That's just part of your DNA, and it will, or whatever, it will just come through,
Uh-huh.
and you don't even have to think about it. Just do it." And I'm starting to realize that as I get older, when I look back at my work, the nature, the visual language always has this kind of graphic um edge to it, I guess. Um, and I've always been drawn to that kind of work. But anyways, so I went back to school. I made a decision that I knew the computer would take off and I wanted to learn it and use it as a tool. And I did. And I think my thesis, I really had to find a way to merge these disciplines into one thing, and I was always into artist books. I studied
Uh-huh.
artist books. I was always into countercultural fanzines, countercultural stuff, and that's when I was like, this is gonna be my thesis because I can design it and I can put it all together, and you know, I think that's what I'm good at. I'm like a generator. I've been told that I'm the type of person that is like a generator where I like to collaborate with people and I like to generate things together and create things together. So K48 was like an accumulation of all of those things in one for me.
I may be dumb for not knowing this. It may be something I should know, but why is it called K48?
Well, so I was again to kind of go back to the 90s. I graduated from Pratt in 2000 and I started working on K48 in 1999. So I was really into technology and techno and electronica. And one of my favorite films that I saw in undergrad was George Lucas's first film. It was called THX 1138. And that film I was coming off of acid after being out all night at a club, and my friend had a copy of it and we were watching it. Like, I was like, this film is so cool. And
Oh, is K-48 one of the androids in it or something?
well, it's funny because I have a cat now, and I named him Thex. So THX is a character. He's the main character played by Robert Duvall in the Hollywood version of George Lucas's first film. And I named my cat after him. But everyone in the film has a code name. So I was thinking for K-48, I wanted it to reference this kind of new era of like um bytes and bits and codes and like these kind of like passwords and usernames that were kind of like all these abstract things in the culture, you know? These it could be a coordinate on a grid, it could be all these different things. And I was doing a photo shoot for a project for one of my classes, and it I was using these generic Duane Reade aspirin, and on the back of one of the pills, it said K-48. And my good friend Sarah in school was like, "You've been thinking of something abstract along these lines? That's it, K-48." And I was like, "I like the ring of that," you know. So it was just K-48.
And your first iteration of this, you I'm guessing you fished from people around, because I know as it iterated out, like and your social scene grew out, um, I see the names in it and stuff. I'm like, oh, I know that person. I know that person. So the first issue, I'm guessing that you pulled in stuff from everyone around you, probably in school, probably people that you
Yeah, I
knew.
mean, at the time I was living with Kelly Walker, Meredith Sparks. I was always hanging out with Ricky Albenda, Rachel Harrison, and Wade Guyton. And so of course they were all in the magazine,
Mhm.
the first issue. Um, and they're all like amazing artists. Yeah, it really was or it came organically for
And
me.
did people do a project specifically for the thing, or were you like, I like that print on your wall, can I reproduce it?
The first issue, I kind of had a theme, but it was very loose. And, it was the beginning of the new millennium. And I just kind of felt it. I just kind of like, I put a photo that I found in the trash that my friend was throwing away of a stop sign with like these like evergreens behind it. And I'm like, I want that as the cover, just like stop. Um, and I think intuitively, I just there was a whole like Y2K scare and everything that things would just turn off and stop. But for me, it was more like before we move forward, let's think where we're going, where we're headed. And when I think about it now in the context of the documentary that I'm working on now, you know, I'm making this documentary about Byrne Porter, and when Byrne was a physicist who was drafted to the Manhattan Project in the 1940s. And when they dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he walked out on his job and he wrote this manifesto called I've Left. And in a way, he was like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And I think the stop sign for me was just kind of like a pause moment before we move forward and just see like where we're at and where we're headed. And I think and that was in the year 2000, right? And I guess I'm somewhat psychic, but I kind of felt like something was going to happen. And sure enough, in 2001, 9/11 happened. And as an artist, I'm doing K-48, I'm making these abstract drawings, but I had a moment where I think like Philip Guston had a moment. I remember going around that same time going to his there was like a big show of his at the Met, and there was a text piece on the wall where that transition he went from the 1950s to doing these abstract expressionist like formalist paintings that were beautiful to those caricature paintings that he did later on. And he made a clean break because he said what was happening at the time with the Vietnam War, he could not make formal work anymore. And I felt the same thing. I'm like, I cannot do this kind of like abstract formalist work when all of this stuff is happening around me. I want to have a voice that, um, yeah.
And by the by, having done this, upset your relationship with Carol Green. Um,
You
did it
know what?
upset other relationships in the art world for you?
Hudson really, he said something to me later on after K48 was like taking off around 2004. And he said something to the extent that K48 was nothing more than a vanity project.
Mhm.
And that really hurt. And n- it was not a vanity project. It was a labor of love where I wanted to, I love helping other people. I love helping. I love doing it because, it was fun. It was exciting. I was meeting all these amazing people. I was part of a community. I was building a community. I didn't want it to be about me. Again, this was like relational aesthetics. This was not about the artist's ego. It was really about creating something bigger than that was accessible and that was dispersed and that wasn't like a formal art object that was put in an
Well,
elite
and the
setting.
thing itself opened other doors for you as well. I
Yeah.
think I was involved in something with you that happened with Jeffrey Deitch, who's a pretty big deal.
Hmm.
At one point, I like it's a bit of a blur, so I can't remember the year or anything like that. But like, so so yeah, so those early relationships, which are very valuable, like high value, high quality art world relationships, seems like those kind of like I mean, you're still talking to Hudson, but he wasn't as excited about your stuff. But what kind of doors did it open up?
Oh, it opened up a lot of doors. Um, as far as Carol, I remember you said Jeffrey Deitch. Kathy Grayson and Jeffrey Deitch were doing a book and a show at the Brooklyn space where K48 had just done like Cult 48, the clubhouse. And Kathy did a show called Live Through This, which I was part of.
Yeah, actually, that the one followed by Kathy's show, I put a video in that your
Okay.
K48 Clubhouse.
Yes. And so Carol came to that party and the party was busted by the cops. And my friends had Avenue D had a big loft in Williamsburg, and we were all going there for the after party because the cops came. And Carol said to me, she said, Scott, Jeffrey and Kathy like totally stole your vibe with K48. Totally stole your vibe. They just took what you're doing and they've gone with it. And I took that as a compliment,
Uh-huh.
but because she knew that K48 had weight, and it was, and yeah, I think she really meant it as like, you're doing something good, and you see the influence of these people. They just kind of like
Yeah, I think that that
they
happens
just
all
did.
over the place. I think sometimes there's coincidence. Two people show up and they're doing work very similar, and sometimes people will knowingly or not take your or consciously or not knowingly or not, but take it, steal it. Um, and yeah, you can choose to let that eat you up, or you can see like, oh, I'm onto a good thing. And whatever they evolve out of whatever they stole from you
Mhm,
is either gonna disappear or wind up theirs anyway. And
mhm,
whatever you continue doing is gonna wind up yours.
right. Um, I mean, I only brought that up because I have a lot of respect for Carol, and I still love her gallery, and I would do anything to have a show there. And I think for me, I've never had the luxury to have a studio and have time to be consistent. And I think I was at the time throwing a lot of curveballs out there only because my interests were really wide and large as an artist. My curiosity as an artist, I wanted to grow in different directions. And I think that the art world really wants you to be branded with a certain medium or style, and they can't sell you if you're all over the place. Um, and I still today I don't really have like a big artist studio. And because I have to support myself in some way or form, like financially to survive, I'm always organically growing in and out of different projects because, again, I don't have the consistency of time and economics. Like,
If you could rewind, given like because I agree with you on that. And again, like I had a curator come over to my studio one time and tell me that I was mercurial. And she meant it as a compliment, but if you understand what that means, what she was saying is that like I'm constantly changing and hard to pin down. And I understood immediately when she said that. I was like, "Oh crap. The thing that I'm doing that she just came and saw is is going to interrupt all the momentum that the thing that I last was doing had created." And this is something that I think of a lot in myself. I'm like, if I could rewind, would I have done it differently? And I think in some ways I would have, but like I'm curious about that with you, like knowing that thing now and knowing that you might have been able to like create more, in some ways create more opportunity and more power for yourself by not going mercurial, would you?
um, I don't even know how to answer that because, like, I'm maybe I have ADHD or something. I'm not sure where it comes from, but maybe it's in my astrological chart that uh, uh, um I'm not really sure. You mean as far as just being like consistent and why I'm not if I would choose consistency, I don't think I can choose that for myself because it's not in my nature, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think
Well, so then
uh
maybe another way to say that is that, consistency is probably not the best word, but maybe your consistency is that sort of like that mercurialness, that changeability, that like
yeah, I'm consistent.
pivoting.
I always say that consistently I'm
Consistently
I'm
inconsistent.
consistent in being inconsistent or something like that. You
So
know,
do you still do K48? Do you still put that out
I
there?
haven't because the eighth issue was the last one, and there's a couple reasons why. I mean, I mentioned before that I went to all the parties, and I think I had a problem with drinking and drugging, and I hit a bottom, and you know, I am now sober almost 12 years, and that has changed my life. I mean, if anything now today, I'm much more consistent. Um, but
Interesting.
I will say that having said that, certain things got in the way. And if I could go back and change something like you just asked me before, it would be that I would remove um n- the need or that I need to participate in partying all the time. I really felt at the time that I had to be at every party.
Uh,
And when I start drinking, I don't want to stop. And not only was I a mess, but I was also hungover a lot and I was difficult. And that's really what got in the way.
uh-huh.
Um and I see that now. I sort of self-sabotaged my own uh and perhaps I would stop projects because I would maybe that was another form of self-sabotage. But,
Do you think that comes from like a and again, like I'm tracking with you, like I'm like, yeah, I hear you. Do you think that comes from a sense of not deserving it, a sense of imposter syndrome? Like can you self-diagnose like why you might have self-sabotaged and do you still?
no, I don't think I do, and I can catch myself. I'm much more aware of it now. I have much more awareness now of myself than I've ever had before. I think when I was younger, I put more energy into others and wanting to support them than I did myself.
Mhm.
And that's what happened to K48. It was not sustainable. I was not a good business person. It was expensive. I had really high
Yeah,
standards
those
as far
things
as
were like
production.
the ones that I saw were like hardcover and you
Well, they weren't
funded that.
cover, they were just really beautifully produced. And
Could swear I held one in my hands that had a hardcover on it. But maybe
never
like again, it's years ago, so I
yeah,
might
never
have
a hardcover. They were always soft. One of them had a slipcase, the last one. But yeah, I would love to do K48, and a good friend of mine now is like, "You gotta bring that back, you gotta do it." And I told him I would love to, but I wanna finish my film and
well,
also
so what did it turn into? Like you're like because I've heard you say two things here. One is that you love supporting other people.
Mhm.
You love being that like the curator that brings things together that like creates that spark from this person, that person that wasn't there before. But also that you kind of overindulged in it, like that you put that in front of yourself. So what does it look like to you creatively to have started taking care of yourself? I know like I haven't seen a lot of the work that you've done over the meantime. I've
Uh-huh.
seen your photographs recently. I looked in your website and saw some stuff before, and you showed me the work in progress of the documentary. What other kinds of things have you been doing? And I guess I'm asking less in the sense of like what are the specifics of the artwork as like how did you get inspired into it? Like what's the path that you took graduating from K48 to like to finding your voice without it?
Well, first of all, K48 was such a learning experience for me. M So inspiring meeting all the artists that I've met along the way, going to their studios, showing their work, learning about their work, was a chance for me to just absorb and understand other artists and be part of their practice. For myself, the work I was doing, let's say my first solo show at John Conley Presents, um, I worked a lot with found images. My work, I guess, post 1990s became more image based and more interested in like reappropriation or using previous visual languages that came before me and kind of making some kind of twist to it. Like one artist who does that really well is Jonathan Monk. And I was very aware when I did that show that had kind of a Warholian feel to it. I did that on purpose. It wasn't that I was trying to be Warhol or anything like him. In fact, I couldn't stand Warhol in undergrad. I boycotted going to his retrospective in Chicago. I didn't see it until 2001 in Berlin, which of course it was amazing. Warhol's amazing. But I think for me, when I was an undergrad, I didn't I dismissed him because of the commercialization of I always say it's Andy Warhol's fault, where we are now with the art market. But he, of course, was, um, foresaw all of
I feel like Jeff Koons has got to hold some of that burden too.
Yes, yes. So, I really wanted to go further beneath the surface, and those pieces were kind of a sly revamping of surface, but I was really more interested in what's beneath the surface, like the blackout paintings. Everyone was blacking out or spiraling out of control. I call them they're the black hole paintings. Um, like in 2007, like Anna Nicole Smith, like suicide OD'd, which is another form of suicide. Um, so many things were spiraling out of control. And this kind of like darkness. So I wanted to take Warholing repetition and implode it in on itself and create these black holes. And anyways, that's kind of where my work was going, was like looking at pop culture and current events and the sort of comic tragedy that prevailed in the 9/11 moment and the war in Iraq. The page six heads were a commentary for me on celebrity culture glossing over the more pertinent issues of the day. And I was also kind of like sleeping with the enemy. I mean, the New York Post is like a right wing Murdoch like newspaper, right? And so I felt like back then, it was 25 cents for the New York Post. So I'm like a quarter, hell yes. And it was like um, good collage material. But I got involved in working on this film with Bern Porter because I learned about his work when I was teaching a class on artist books at NYU. And the voice in his work really spoke to me because it was kind of how I was using the found to kind of critique the culture at large in some way. Byrne was like kind of an American Dadaist. He, I think, in a sly way, was critiquing consumption, waste, and the atomic age and the American dream. And when I discovered his work, I was like, why haven't I heard of this guy? And he, in a lot of ways, is like a pioneer of using like found images. I mean, he was doing it before the pictures generation. Byrne Porter had a retrospective in New York City at Franklin Furnace in 1979, and Cynthia Carr wrote it up in the Village Voice twice. I'm sure that Richard Prince and Barbara Kruger saw the show or heard about it because then it was like images and appropriation was like the thing. So I came out of that as well when I was an undergrad. Before I was doing the techno drawings, I mean, I was very much into, like I said previously, like Barbara Kruger and even David Wojnarowicz was working a lot with like found imagery. Um, so when I started working on this film, an organic transition for me as an artist, I had to relearn photography, which was like my first love in undergrad. And so I had to learn depth of field and how to use the camera again. So I got so into photography, especially over the pandemic. Like I bought my first analog. I'm like, I'm going to get the Pentax K1000. That was my camera.
'Cause
Um,
my dad built our house because my mom forbade him to continue using the bathroom to develop photography. So he built our house around a darkroom. So
wow.
when I got to a certain age, he bought my sister and I Pentax K1000s because they were
Oh,
like
cool.
dead simple and like
Yes.
he's like, this is what you learn on.
Yeah. And I have a darkroom now in my apartment in the city. So I go down and I make prints and I'm loving it. So for me, I'm still finding images, but I'm framing them and making them myself. And I'm trying to use my own photography in a way where I was using found images before, more in a kind of like conceptual or collage kind of way. I don't want to do straightforward editions or series. I kind of what I'm working on now are these sequences that are also a reference to working in video. So I got really into video. I actually just did my first paid freelance gig where I shot video at an
Amazing.
event and I edited it myself. And I actually really enjoy moving image and like sound and like putting that together, like I like the
Yeah.
film I'm working on.
I fell
So
in love with that obviously a while back, and I feel like it feels important for me to say too that like I hear you with the collage stuff. For some reason I've been gravitating over the past year or two to like trying to figure out what collage looks like when it's moving, you know?
mhm.
So I've
Well,
been
putting a film together is totally collage. Um, that's how I'm kind of approaching, my Burn Porter documentary.
when I put this out there, we talked about asking you for images and things like that. I would love if you had a little clip of that to link to as well, but that's up to you. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
whatever
of
whatever
course.
works for you.
Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I see connections throughout all of my work. All of them have, some aspect of some some kind of uh like what are we doing toward I don't know how to put it into words. I mean, I have a deep concern for humanity right now, and I
Mhm.
think I always have. And I think it's in my work in some way. Even if it's the abstract drawings in the 90s, I think um those were referencing where we were at socially at the time. I don't know if you remember all the internet parties in the 90s and um but I
I
mean,
mean, I wasn't there enough. Like I did move to New York in the 90s, but like I was working at the print shop and stuff like that. I wasn't culturally part of it. I've heard about them since, but
there was
no.
like Razorfish. There were all these like internet startups. It was kind of a really exciting time. And then 9/11 happens and look at where we are now. I mean, it's actually really hard for me to make work that's quote unquote political now. I mean, it's just like I'm talking to the choir, it's didactic. Like what it's everything is so stupid right now.
Yeah,
I
I mean, at a certain point, I do recall, like, I think in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of political artwork, but to the point that I think you're trying to make right now, there's certainly a feeling of like what grain of sand is this going to move on the beach?
yeah.
But I do think there's plenty of room for observing, documenting, and I don't know, creating a record of where we're at, how you feel,
Well,
what the
that's
people
all
around
gonna
you are
come
saying
through,
or
you
doing.
know, as an artist, that's all gonna come through in my film about Burn Porter. Um, I think for sure. And then in my new photography, I'm trying to find ways to make it more personal and more about a document of my own um life. And I love documenting and taking photos of really close friends, like I'm a huge fan of like Hervé Guibert. Um, he's a French writer and photographer who died of AIDS. Um, of course I love Peter Hujar. Like, even when I met you, I was running around with a drink in one hand and a Polaroid camera in another hand.
Oh, when you were talking about being sober, I had a moment of guilt because I know in screen tests you were standing there drinking a Budweiser.
I love the
And
party.
that's what and we did that. Like Bob and I were filming, and it's just a thing, like it's an easy thing to do. Someone comes in front of the camera, give 'em a drink, to loosen up.
Yeah. I do. I still find myself, I'm a little stiff being sober, but like I don't know, I'm much more in my skin. I
Mhm.
think I was always, the alcohol and drug would kind of get me to come out of my shell, but then I wasn't really attached to my body. I wasn't really attached. I don't know how to explain it, but like it's
Yeah,
kind
you
of like,
weren't you it yeah. The 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 flip side of it'll loosen you up is that you're one step away from owning who you are anymore, right? Something
mm,
like that. Like Without it, you completely own who you are. With it, maybe you own it, maybe you don't, but you're
or you
closer to
can
not owning it.
destroy it.
Yeah.
So, I was very, my nickname in the early 2000s was Scotty Darko after Donnie Darko. And I embraced that with, I loved it. Now I'm Scotty Light is a
Aw.
nickname. But
Um, what do you like? Because I feel like we've gotten through a lot of stuff that like there's like a good arc there that brings you to now. What do you hope for, like with your work?
I would love some recognition. I don't have any expectations really. I think having lost both of my parents now and feeling somewhat close to the edge or how, you start to become really aware of time when you get older and how much you have left and what you want to do. And I was very ambitious when I was younger, and I think I um I think I was somewhat delusional. And
I'd counter argue that I think that delusion is necessary to
yeah,
some
no,
extent. Yeah.
totally. No, it was kind of a for me growing up in a small town. I mean, Philippe in Paris, going back to Paris, like he knew I was some kid from the Midwest in Missouri and that I was naive in a way. And he did the best he could to help me learn so much in Paris about everything. So the question, I'm sorry, I'm trying to like your question
Well,
was like,
I'm curious about he tried his best to prepare you. What can you like point out one thing that he taught you that like the you felt like paid off or that like you would have been lost without or something?
mm, um, I think, he really taught me to live and be an artist, and to not I know now why he didn't want me to go out with Franck, even though Franck is an amazing guy. I'm still really close to him. He values creativity and people who are creative inside and out and live a life of art and didn't want to see me become basic or bourgeois. I don't know, like he was really kind of trying to foster me as a young artist and that's what I need to do. I had this corporate job for 8.5 years and I just got laid off. And in a lot of ways, I think it's a blessing, like I was feeling really burnt out and it's not my path. It's not what I want to do. I needed the financial blanket, the security, but maybe it's better to not have it and to be hungry and to force myself to do the things I want to do. I
To be
think when
able
you
to have more to risk, to have more to lose or something like that.
Well, I think when you have a luxury job and you're making like over $100,000 a year, like I was, you get caught up with spending the money
Mhm.
and you get caught up in materialism. You get caught up in, I mean, I was very aware of it, but I did, and it was very helpful, but I was able to spend tons of money on camera equipment for my film and new computers. I mean, it wasn't like I wasted money, but I mean, at the same time, I had my first yard sale up here and I'm like, and having had yard sales for my parents and emptying their houses, I'm like, I'd rather be nomadic right now and just have my camera and a backpack, I think. Instead of being tied down to material. Because as an artist, that's the goal is to have a low overhead and to be free. And I think if any advice for a younger artist would be to not imprison yourself with fashion or material things that, you know, they're going to give you all the credit cards you want. And when you have debt, luckily, I have no debt right now other than my mortgage, um, and a little bit of my student loans, which I'm thinking about finishing that off, but, because I can't decide if they're gonna forgive it or not because I'm in this program, but anyways, that's another but, when you have that debt, it imprisons you, and you can't it's hard to create because you gotta keep working for the man, and now working for the man, it's like these dark overlords and AI and all of these, like, people supporting Trump, it's like, I don't want another corporate job. I
Uh-huh.
have no desire. I wanna keep it simple and not complicate things and just
Well,
when I
if you could time travel to your fantasy self in 2 years, and I'm trying to get at, what's your vision for yourself as an artist, as in your work? And also you said you'd liked some recognition, and so, I would like to, because recognition to me might be different than it is to you, so I'm just really curious what that looks like. What does it look like
I
to
just
feel
wanna
that?
be valued and appreciated for what I gave, what I've given back, um, and, you know, I think there was a moment in New York City where I started something and it it was exciting, it was a moment, and, you know, some of the artists I worked with are now famous and, like, really, you know I remember I was hanging out with Ryan McGinley when he was 19 and Dash Snow and all those guys at Cherry Tavern, and I went back to Ryan's and I bought one of his photos for $50, and I sold it later for 3,000. I wish I still had it, but my point is that I I think I was probably the first person to give him, like, a page in a magazine, um, and the same goes for some of these other artists. Um, Not that anything is owed to me, I just wanna be like, like, I would love it if I weren't forgotten, and what I mean by that is that when I did the bedroom show in 2002, it went on to Paris and at Agnes B Gallery du Jour, and Agnes B bought the bedroom show. When I went back to Paris last year, I went to Agnes's gallery and I met the director because he had written me months prior about the possibility of doing a 20-year reunion of the bedroom show. And I wrote him back in the email saying how excited I was to do that. He never responded. So I decided one day when I was in Paris, I would just go to the gallery and ask to see if I could meet him. And so I met him and we had a nice conversation. And then he texted me when I was out in Paris and he said, Agnes would like to meet you today. Do you have time? And I was like, yes, I have time. So I went, and this was during Fashion Week. And Agnes is like 81 years old and she's working on her collection and she's photographing it and filming it herself, like she does. And we're in her penthouse studio in the 10th. And I got to spend 10 minutes with her and it was amazing. I hadn't seen her since 2003 and 2004 when she brought me back a second time. And her assistant, who was so lovely, gave me a book of Agnes's collection of art. And I was so happy because there was a reproduction at the bedroom show, which is in her collection. So I got back, I was so pumped and so excited. And I got back to New York and I finally was going to open the book and look at it. There was no credit to K48, to myself, or anybody in the show. All it said was the bedroom show. It wasn't even the correct title. Every artist in her collection had a bio at the end of the book. There was no bio for myself or for K48 as a collective. Do you want to know how much that hurt?
Yeah, I can hear it.
So that's where I'm at right now as an artist is, it's like, what gives? Like I've worked so hard, I've given so much. And I see a lot of people who come from a lot of money, like Kathy Grayson and even Agnes B. And, they get to do what they want to do and they get recognized for it. But if you're the little guy, the little fish, um, so I wrote to Agnes's assistant and I said there was an oversight, if you, in the future, if you're going to publish anything about the bedroom show, can you please, this is how I would like the credit to read. And of course, they were apologetic and it wasn't a major oversight. But there were two books, one about Agnes's art collection and the other one about her as a fashion designer. And the bedroom show appears in both books, and neither of them had any kind of credit. So, um, in the end, it's like, what does all this mean anyway?
Is there ever, I can feel the weight of that, and I understand like the work that you put in, and the things that you look to come out of it, and it's not like I've met very few artists that are like, I'm gonna make $1 million off of this. Like, it's if you want to make $1 million is the worst idea ever to be an artist.
I've never been in it to make money, and maybe that's part of my
s-
problem.
no, I don't. No, but my question is there ever a point where you just think, fuck this shit, I'm walking away? Like, because I can feel that in you when you're talking about this thing, like that's
Um,
you've got like the stair step of all these great things, and then like they don't even put your name in it. And is there ever a moment where you're like, fuck it?
um, no, I'm gonna keep doing my thing, and it's not like I'm gonna stop. Otherwise, I would just want to die, and I don't. I I I still have the light and the passion in me to be an artist, and I'm grateful for that. And it's kind of nice to not have the pressure of the market, whatever that is today. Um, Having a wait list to churn out something. It's kind of nice to just work at my own pace and do what I want to do and explore mediums that I want to explore. And whether or not someone likes it or not, like Kurt Vonnegut always said, make your art, write your book, just do it for you. And
Yeah,
then you can tear it up and throw it away.
that's a huge struggle for me. Is it's not that I'm not making work for myself. It's that sometimes when I'm in the middle of an idea or an execution or something like that, I get doubt because I'm like, am I making this for the audience that I expect? Um,
I
it
feel like
was one of those. Say
I
again.
feel like I'm making the work now for me. I mean, I'm more than happy to share it and love sharing it, but I think it's important to make it for you.
Hmm. I absolutely agree. I think it's critical. I think it's unsustainable if you don't.
Mm. I think early on there was a moment where I don't think I understood myself as well, or I wasn't exploring who I was. Maybe I was looking too much out and not enough in. And I realize that now. I'm also amazed at just how prolific I was while I was partying back then. But I think the work has more. One of my best friends now, actually, I met him when I was recently sober, and he wanted to take my portrait. And he contacted me on Facebook, and his name is Dietmar Busse. And he's a German artist. He's been in New York since the early 90s, and he's my best friend, and I love him so much. And so he saw my new work, and he's like, Scott, this is so you. It's personal. It's still graphic. It has like some of I can see like from what you were doing before and how it is now, but you're making the images and you're hand printing them and hand developing. And everything, and it's very you. And, I really respected his, advice and opinion on what I was doing now because I think he did not like the work I was making, like, in the aughts. He liked K-48, but I don't think some of the work he doesn't like work like that.
How do
Um,
you feel about the work that you've done? Is there anything that you're like, "Oh, that wasn't me," or
there's a few things, yes. There's one piece that I got out of my storage and I'm like, "Oh my god, should I throw this away?" Um, and I think all artists, not everything's gonna be good, and it's okay, especially if you're young and, um, where I was at the time. But, yeah, I mean, you have to make a lot. Like, I think Cartier-Bresson said you have to make 10,000 pictures before you get a one good one.
Mm.
Um,
Do you
and
think that's has that been important to you? Do you think that's important to other artists to actually be prolific? I say this with my own shame because Simon Watson, used to do regular studio visits with me, and he loved my work, but he constantly harped on me. He's like, "Every day when you leave the studio, if you haven't completed something, scribble on paper and tack it to the wall. Like,
uh,
make sure you complete something every day." Because I'm very much like a, "Oh, this is gonna take me 4 months to do," kind of person, you know?
yeah, I feel that. I think we all work at our own pace. Um, there are moments in the year where I have spurts where I get a lot done, and then there are days that are just administrative or days where I have to work to make money. But I think overall, like, even my cabin has become like an art project for me. Like, I'm everything about the way I live is like art to me, is an art project. So I think we're conditioned to make money, to make things of value. I think a lot of it has to do with ego in Western culture, our name. And Byrne Porter was saying this, when they were blowing up islands off the coast of Guam, Byrne Porter was like checking out these indigenous cultures and that had no Western value system where it was about the preservation of someone's name. It was more about the community and how you could use your skills to benefit the others in your community. It wasn't about, I'm in competition with you to sell my work for millions of dollars at Christie's. And it's about the preservation of my name and my brand. That is a Western idea. And I realize that now. I was caught up in a game for a long time, and I don't even care anymore about that game. I just don't. I like to be creative because it's a part of being alive. And I make art for myself now, or I'm always excited to be in a show and to show it and share it with people. But I have no expectations on it's even like arbitrary sometimes putting a value on something. Um, it's It's abstract and, like, how much money do you put like, what do I price my things at, like
Yeah, that's insane. Like, for me, when I finally did a show of paintings, it was kind of a calculation of how many do we think we're gonna sell and how much do I need to make to support the next body.
yeah, I mean, totally, I mean, that's a reality, and that's the world we live in, so I have to start thinking you have to sort of think that way in a way to, like, how much time did I put into this, resources, so that's what it's worth because I need to keep going as an artist, there's nothing wrong with that. I guess my point was being, like, this is a system that was created where Um, I don't
Yeah, no, I understand your point about the sort of the danger or the folly or the demon of chasing ego recognition. Um, and I think that could be really interesting and deep conversation about whether that's cooked into us as humans or whether that's conditioned into us as a culture. And I suspect that there's some kind of balance or fight there regardless. Um, but do you have a sense of what would it look like to remove that and still feel that sense of recognition or satisfaction? Because I don't want to use the word success, but like you want to feel satisfaction about the things that you make. You know, you want to feel like, oh my God, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess in a way I do want to show and I do want I remember recently I was in a group show that Slava put together at the LGBTQ Center.
Slava Moguchin.
Yes,
I should talk
and
to him.
I was so happy to be part of the show. And he's somebody who a friend who recognizes that, I put him in the very first K-48. I was probably one of the first people to, you know, promote his work in 1999, 2000. And he actually said, he's like, you put me into all these shows and magazines. Of course, I'm going to put your work in the show. And he seems to really like the work that I'm doing. And so I remember at the opening, I was so happy to be in a show and to see friends and to still be part of it after 31 years of being in New York City.
Uh-huh.
And I'm in it for the long haul. And and I don't know, I think I'm just more realistic about it now, and I'm much more, um I'm okay, I'm accepting of, like, not not having a career as an artist that supports me, although I would like to have that, of course. I guess that's my goal. Like, aren't isn't it for all of us just to, like, make our art and, like, be free and, like, sell it? Maybe that'll happen. I've seen people come back. Okay, I'll give you an example. In 2010, I did a show with Andrew Edlin. They hired me to curate a show, and the show was called Out of Order. And I had met a few years prior in person. I knew who this person was, but I never met him uh, in person until I was at Utrecht Art Supply. And I used to work there, but in Chicago. And the boss in New York was still the boss um, that I had when I was in school. Anyways, he was working with um, Stephen Tashin, and he introduced me to Taboo. And I was like, "Oh, you're Taboo, out of drag." And he's like, "Don't you know who I am?" And I was like, "Yes, I know who you are, but I didn't recognize you out of drag." And so I was putting this show together and I thought of Taboo and I loved the work. Nobody was paying attention to Taboo. Nobody. Taboo was nearly about to move out of his apartment in the East Village, I think. I went to his apartment and it was incredible. And I chose a piece that was enormous. It was like, I don't know, 10 foot by 7 foot. And it was Diana Vreeland, a painting of Diana Vreeland. And I'm like, this is going to be the centerpiece of the show. And it was just rolled canvas. So I bought stretchers for it myself and I stretched it and I touched it up on the edges and I made it the centerpiece of this show. And Taboo was actually mad at me because it didn't sell. Nothing sold. And so I was asked again to do a show in 2012. I did three shows actually. The second one was called Be Out, and then no, I'm sorry. The second one was called Take Out, and the third one was called Be Out. And of course, Taboo was in Be Out as well. Again, nothing sold. Well, two of my friends who were in that show, artists, Jacob Robin and Sam Gordon, started a gallery, which is amazing. And they told me, they're like, we saw Taboo's work in your show, and now Taboo went from like nothing to being a superstar, and he is a superstar, and I'm very happy for him. But my point is it's another example of me supporting artists and watching their careers like skyrocket. I don't even have a taboo in my cabin. I've always wanted a taboo. Of course, I can't afford one now, but that's the game. I mean, like, it's like I'm sure Andrew Edlund, I love. I'm not saying anything bad about anybody here. It's just I'm sure he could kick himself in the butt for not selling that work because now, I mean, Taboo is like so. I don't, he's always in Gucci and like I don't know if you follow his account on Instagram, but he shows with Star.
Joe, I knew of him, of course, when I was much younger, and I have heard things about him recently. I don't follow it these days enough to have known that he really blew up, but I believe you because I've seen other people talking about him.
So I guess my point is that you said anything can happen. Your career can be picked up like Carmen Herrera's career when she was 90 years old and had a retrospective at the Whitney. Nobody paid attention to her until 10 years before she died. You never know when they're going to come to you and be like, oh, you have this history. You're awesome. You got to be ready for it. And I got to get ready just in case. I mean, I'm not saying anything's going to happen, but like, I'm just saying like, that you lay the foundation and you just got to keep going. You just don't give up. And, but it can happen. And I'm very, very happy for Taboo um, and it,
Scotty, that's an amazing line too, because we've been going for almost 2 hours now to wrap on. But I also kind of want to ask you, if there's anything else, any other thoughts like that you have, like putting this out there for other artists to see, other young artists, people in I don't know, you're in my shoes who sort of like had these like weird moments and then like I don't know, shot themselves in the foot or whatever it is. Like, I mean, that last line that you gave was great. Like that's going to be an outtake right there, but
I think living a life of an artist is the best life you could ever aspire to live. Um, I always said I would never go corporate, but I kind of needed to because I hit bottom, I had a lot of debt, got me through. But, I think knowing yourself, learning to know who you are and what you're capable of, and nurturing that in yourself and not giving up is really, really important. And, like for anybody young, I think it's just try not to get caught up in the game of people pleasing or trying to be at every party. I think get into yourself, into your work. Byrne Porter always said, let wait for the world to show up at your door. Just do your thing and the world will come to you. You just keep going, and if you have to get a corporate job, get it. I mean, they're great. You get 401k benefits and like I'm not slamming that either.
if only you got K-48 benefits.
Oh my God, yes. But that was I think K48 was my fault. I think I wasn't a good businessman and I was partying too much. It was
I
my
mean, I
own
think you did great with K-48.
it was
You
my
know,
own
I guess you're saying you end up losing money on it, so it becomes unsustainable. But
Well, the internet changed everything. I mean, there was a CD with every issue. It was before Spotify, it was before blogs, it was before YouTube. I mean, there were videos on the first 5 issues of K48, and there was no YouTube yet. Um, and I think the way we started consuming information changed the way people um They like it more instant. It can take it took me a year to put together a K-48 for various reasons, but people don't have patience anymore. They want things really fast.
Yeah, I'm trying to build up a bunch of these before I start publishing them so that I can essentially afford to do one a week, even if it takes me 3 weeks to, like, to coordinate the next person, you know what I mean?
I think it's important that you're doing this. That was the other part of your question because I think it's important to r document artists who've been there for the long haul that are still at it, and hopefully that can give some sort of inspiration and not, to anybody like that there are just other voices that need to be heard, like there are many, many, many voices. And today, eh, it's even getting bigger. Like, um, like in the 1960s, it was all white men. And then Andy Warhol really, he was the first one who was out gay. All of his, like, I think all the other ones, like Rauschenberg, and a lot of them were still closeted. But Andy was like,
Rauschenberg and Johns, yeah.
Andy was like, that was what's really important about Andy Warhol. But today, I mean, there are so many other indigenous people and people of color who have stories that need to be heard and told.